We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.
Talking to myself again, but it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. And it feels alright when they come and say.
Welcome along to NUFC Matters. I'm Steve Wraith. Delighted to see I'm joined once again by Ross Gregory. How are you, Ross?
I'm good, Steve. Thanks. How's yourself?
Very good, mate. Good to see you. As always, plenty to talk about in the next hour about Newcastle United. Plenty happening. And where to start? Let's start with Al Ramayan and that interview. 7 minutes long, Ross. I don't think I've ever known a chairman in Newcastle United pack so much into 7 minutes. Including the reveal of such a wonderful inside jacket, which I think has got people looking across the internet for a place in Newcastle that does that kind of suit. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting to say the least. Great to hear him speak. Great to hear his vision. Great to hear his views on a wonderful, wonderful season. We'll never get sick of waxing lyrical about what happened last year. But yeah, what was your take on that interview, Ross?
Yeah, I think good that we heard from him. Good that he's come out in albeit I suppose it's one of those where it's a bit of a PR exercise in some ways. He's not sitting there answering questions from journalists, from media commentators, or even taking questions from fans. But look, he's been the kind of the public face for Newcastle for a bit of a period now, along with Amanda Staveley and the rest of the board. So we haven't heard too much from him. I think, and I've said this before, I would like to hear a lot more from him and from PIF as a whole. I'd like to have them. I'd like to, for journalists to have that ability to put some questions to them. I appreciate it's very unlikely that's going to happen in the short term personally, but I think as an exercise in terms of communicating with the fans, getting a message out there, trying to put a point of view across of where the club is at and what the ambitions are and what the aims are, then I think it's really welcomed. Really interesting that I think the level of ambition and the level of desire at the club is quite impressive and in some ways putting Newcastle right at the very forefront, saying that they should have the ambition and the aspiration to be the number one club in the country, in Europe, and if not more. So already putting that kind of ambitions out and making people aware of the club isn't going to just settle for plodding around in even just in the top echelons. They really want to push this and really want to be ambitious, which I think is music to the ears of most Newcastle fans. But but we know it's an ongoing process. We know that that Newcastle will have to grow in a kind of steady and in considered manner, not just throwing money at it and not just aiming for the stars initially. But look, it's been a fantastic journey. It's been an incredible incredible last season, or 18 months even, and it was good to get the views of Ryan as well, and hopefully we get to hear more from him.
It's interesting because you say you'd love the opportunity for journalists to be able to sit and have a chat with them, ask them questions. I get it, Ross. We've discussed it before, and I've discussed it quite heavily actually on a recent episode last week with Ben Jacobs. I mean, do you think if you got that opportunity to do that yourself, Ross, with a room full of journalists, that would probably put to bed a lot of the stuff that gets brought up by journalists, every season, the ownership, who actually owns the club, what do you think about this? Well, all those questions that I guess journalists would like to get out. Do you think if they did that, and maybe that's part of the plan, maybe they will do it forward. Do you think that eventually would leave Newcastle after that once they've done it? Because it might be something that they're working their way towards.
I think it would, Steve. I really do think that it would be something that it might not look. It probably wouldn't put it to bed once and for all. It wouldn't put anything to bed once and for all, because there'll be ongoing issues, I'm sure, and ongoing mini controversies or whatever you want to call them. But I think in the short and medium term, to I don't know, address and approach some of the questions head on, honestly, with a bit of transparency. Some of the issues that you've talked about around the ownership, around the what the overall aims are, how some of the work that they're doing at Newcastle, how that conflates and conflicts potentially or with wider geopolitical situations. I know this isn't football, and I know some of this stuff that we're talking about isn't necessarily what a lot of fans are interested in, and they don't care about it. Let's be honest about it. But it won't go away unless some of these things I think are addressed. So I'm not saying it needs to be a big, I don't know, mea culpa type of interview or anything else like that. But I do, and it might just be one or two handpicked kind of journalists that get the opportunity to sit down and discuss some of these issues, because they are big issues, regardless of whether we want them to be or not. It's the way of the world, and this isn't just related to Newcastle United, and we'll see the same with Manchester United if and when their takeover goes through, and depend on obviously on who buys them. We've seen it in the past with Chelsea and Roman Abramovich. We've seen it with Manchester City and their Qatari ownership, and it's the way of the world at the minute. I would love for Newcastle to be as open and transparent and as communicative as possible with the media, with the fan base, with every stakeholder that the club has. Will it happen initially or eventually? I'd like to think so, but I have my doubts. And while these questions are remaining unanswered, while journalists still have certain concerns or queries or issues with the club, then they will just keep being brought up and pushed in Newcastle's face. So I would like to see them addressed a little bit more head on, but I'm realistic enough to appreciate that that's probably not going to happen in the short term.
Yeah, it's one to watch. I think they're very cute and very clever and very wise at the PR game. And I agree, Steve.
And look, what you can't level at the club at the minute is a lack of communication. The communication with the fan base, with journalists, with media, with other stakeholders is miles better than what it has been over the last 15 years. I know we keep harking back to that, but that's your reference point. This is what the previous ownership did. This is what the current ownership is doing, and it's worlds apart. It's worlds away. That's not to say that it's perfect. That's not to say that there isn't room for improvement. The PR side is, like you say, Steve, is very, very. They're very cute with it. They know the value of PR. They've got they've got a lot of things right. But yeah, you'd still like to see a certain few things tightened up on as well. But it's come a million miles on from where it was.
I mean, I see a lot of the fallout on Twitter from it as well, Ross, and I do feel still, if we had transparency across all 20 clubs in the Premier League starting this season, from everybody, and there's some major question marks, I think, over certain clubs such as Chelsea, such as Everton. Newcastle will fall into that category, obviously because of who owns them, and I think if there was transparency across the board, then I think the Premier League would probably be a better place. I think it feels, certainly to Newcastle fans, a bit like at school when a kid gets singled out. That now is unacceptable. It's unacceptable in humanity if you single somebody out because of their gender or their race or whatever. And I think if there was equality in an examination of the Premier League, I think we might get somewhere. It almost feels, though, that Newcastle are the big boys now coming to the table. And it feels as if the Premier League tried the best, the so-called Big Six tried their best to stop us coming to the table. And now that we're at the table, it almost feels like sour grapes that they continue to try and, humiliate the club and the owners and try and find out, try and trip them up at some point. And Newcastle almost feel as if they're being extra cautious. I mean, this, for instance, the £75 million budget story that was, led by Craig Hope. That particular story, for instance, is, and everybody at the club playing down how much we've got. A lot of that feels really down to financial fair play. Newcastle being ultra cautious, not a bad thing, I hasten to add. And, I just think it does really feel that we are being singled out because of that. But that might just be my feeling. That might just be the way I feel about it, Ross. I don't know. But I still think the solution to it is very simple. Get an independent ombudsman or whatever you want to call them, an independent party to come in and just do a complete sweep of the Premier League, just see who's got the house in order and see who owns what and who's got what. And, I'm sure Newcastle will come out with smelling the roses. You know what I mean?
I think you've got some fair points there, Steve. I think the Premier League's I'm not saying it's in a difficult place or it's in a mess or anything else like that, but it's boxed itself into a bit of a corner, I think, and it's allowed over a period of time various different investors to come in with various different motives, with a complete lack of transparency in some cases. The money that swirls around the Premier League now is obscene. We all know that. And some of the reasons and the issues that are around some of the ownership, financial fair play, etc., so on. So I've mentioned Chelsea, I've mentioned, Man United and Man City. They've all got their issues, their ongoing issues. You even look at, at some of the, you go further down outside of obviously the Premier League and the owners and directors tests at some of the Championship clubs and League One clubs has been severely lacking over the recent years, and what's saved some of the Premier League clubs from necessarily getting into the issues around ownership that some of the Football League clubs have had is just because there's extra resources there, there's extra finance there, and there's a greater profile. So I think an independent regulator or ombudsman or whatever you want to call it around the Premier League is really, really much needed. I think at times it almost feels like you need a bit of a reset with the Premier League. It needs to just reset itself in terms of its values, its traditions, and everything else like that. But unfortunately, I don't see that ever happening. I think the horse is already bolted in that sense, and trying to roll back on some of the issues that the Premier League has, it would be very, very difficult and take a period of time. I understand Newcastle getting the questions and the scrutiny that they are getting. I think it has died down since the initial takeover, but it will continue to rear its head every now and again. The scrutiny it's understandable for me. Maybe I'm seeing it through more journalistic eyes than kind of supporter eyes, if you like. I think there have been some valid questions and some valid issues, and I don't think it's necessarily so over the last 12 months, it probably has been a lot more scrutiny on Newcastle than what there has been on other clubs. No doubt at all about that, I don't think. But mark my words, if Manchester United get taken over by a Qatar element, the scrutiny on them will be vast. It will be huge. You might not always see it because you're not necessarily always looking for Man United stories, or you're looking for Man City stories or whatever. Whereas as a Newcastle fan, people who are watching this show, you read that stuff on Twitter because you follow certain people on Twitter who are always talking about the club, because of that's just what you see when you're in that mindset, or you're supporting that club. But it's really interesting, and I think Newcastle are being cautious. I think they're right to be cautious. I think they have to play the game a little bit while the noise is quite loud around the club. I do think they have to be clever and do everything the right way, because it does feel at times that people are waiting for them to trip up. People are waiting for them to make a mistake, and then they'll look to try and pounce. So Newcastle have to do things as carefully as possible. But that doesn't mean for me that they can't continue to be transparent, continue to be open, and answer some of the big questions around the club. Look, I don't want this to sound like a negative start to the show or anything. I don't want to be.
I think it's important that we speak. I think it's important we speak about it. I mean, that's why I give Ben Jacobs an opportunity to speak about it, because I know he feels, quite passionate about it, and I know you do. You know what I mean? And I think it's important that we'll give another view on the panels when we do these shows. And
absolutely right.
The fact that we've got an owner who is willing to come out and speak so eloquently as he did for 7 minutes on Newcastle United and got everybody talking, you know what I mean? Then, I think really it's, a gentle reminder maybe that one day, coming out and actually doing an interview about everything would probably be beneficial. Yeah, would it ever solve all the problems? Who knows? But and I know this particular section of the program will probably get some people pulling their hair out, some people annoyed, like you quite rightly said at the start as well. People will be, some people don't care about the whole situation. They're just interested in the football. So yeah, I think it's it's something that the club should look at and probably will look at. But I do feel that there was a reason for doing that, and I feel it's almost like testing the water. And again, it's not doing an interview with David Craig like Mike Ashley used to do on Sky, somebody again handpicked. But there are journalists, I guess, who it's only natural. You have some journalists who you get on with better than others, and maybe moving forward, Al Ramayan may do an interview with somebody who's a little bit closer to the club than maybe he's the next man. So it might well happen,
I think again, you're spot on, Steve. I do think that it's important that we have these conversations, whether people want to listen to this part of the show or not. But I think it's important that we continue to have these conversations and communicate about it and raise the issues when they come up and say, look, this is maybe a slight concern. Let's not just bury our heads in the sand. I think we're better than that as a fan base. I think we're better than that as a group of supporters. I don't think Newcastle fans in the main are purely for what pardon the pun, but I don't think Newcastle fans are purely black and white. I think there is a grey area. There is scope within Newcastle fan base for nuance, for debate. It's something you don't just have to. It's part of the social media landscape these days, isn't it? In the media opinions, where everything has to be one side or the other side. Everything has to be. You have to be completely left or completely right. You can't be in the middle. You have to be black or white. You can't be slightly grey. There seems to be no room for debate or nuance or conversation at times around key issues like this, or like football, or whether it's politics or whatever it is, or it's music. Everything's either brilliant or rubbish. There's no kind of middle ground at the minute. I think as a general fan base, I think Newcastle fans are intelligent enough, well educated enough, but also, I don't know, considerate enough that there is other opinions and that there is a wider issues that are going on. It might not impress people at the minute. It might not, it might not be what people want to talk about. And I fully get that. Some people just want their football to be football escapism, entertainment, something that they can go in with their mates and watch and get excited about transfers, get excited on a match day, and they're not interested in the running of the club or the geopolitics or anything else like that. But it is still important, Steve, you're right, that when there is the chance to give these topics a bit of a platform and a bit of a debate, that we take it. It doesn't have to be for everybody, but it is important that we don't just bury our heads in the sand, I think.
Yeah, okay. Next up was the Times newspaper reporting that Newcastle are set to embark on a feasibility study aimed at increasing St James's Park from the current capacity of 52,300 to a potential 60,000, adding an extra 10,000 seats onto St James's Park, which of course, the irony is not lost on you when you think back in 2019, Mike Ashley gave 10,000 tickets away. So it shows you we've come such a long way in a short space of time. Of course, those of us of a black and white persuasion knew that if you were walk the Geordie giant, so to speak, that there would be a huge demand for tickets and people would want to come back, tenfold. So it's no surprise to hear this. And obviously the purchase of the land above the metro station, by the club gives potential for expansion on the Gallagher end of the ground. The East Stand is the section which we seem to be talking about. And according to the Times, and I'll quote here, advancements in engineering and architecture mean that there is the possibility of a redesign that would use more glasswork and allow extra light to go through the stand, potentially leading to a significant capacity increase. So talk about development on the east side of the stadium, which of course is long overdue. 1970s, it was a grand plan to build a super stadium. They ran out of money and the ground was never completed. The East Stand looked very, very modern for long periods of time. First executive boxes were in there, if you remember, back in those late 80s, early 90s. But as time's gone on, that stand sadly has dated badly and now is the stand that's been left behind. So what's your thoughts on this news and story that is out there? It's a feasibility study only, which for anybody who is unaware, just, essentially they're just looking at what are the options? What could they do? How could they do it? Is it financially viable? This isn't a commitment to do this at the moment. They are simply looking at options.
Yeah, and I think it's, we've talked about it plenty of times on this show, Steve. It's much needed. The club needs to expand St James's Park or move to a new stadium ultimately, because 52,000 is a very, very good capacity. It's a big old ground still, but if Newcastle have them ambitions to challenge right at the very top under the ownership, then they're going to need another 10,000 capacity on top of that. I still think 65,000 is probably round about where the club should probably be targeting. I know we've done pieces with the Chronicle and everything as well on what size stadium do you think Newcastle need to play in to achieve, and some people have said 70, 75, 80,000, which would be fantastic if we get that. But I think realistically 65,000 to me sounds around about right. How you get to that is the kind of, I was going to say the $1 million question. It's probably about $1 billion question these days in terms of developing St James's. I've got a lot of love for the East Stand. It's where my season ticket was. It's where my dad and my granddad sat from the 70s when it was first built, and my dad's still in the same seat as what he was back in whenever it was, 72, 73 when he first got in there. So I've got a lot of affection for the East Stand, but you're right, Steve, it has been left behind now, and it looks, it obviously makes the ground a little bit lopsided. If there's anything that they can do there which doesn't affect the listed buildings behind it, then it seems like the sensible option. Great to see that the feasibility studies have started and that the owners are looking at the options, looking at what can be done. I've said this before. I've said this plenty of times before. If it was an option between developing St James's Park up to something 60, 65,000 or moving to a new purpose-built stadium somewhere else, I would want to stay at St James's Park every day of the week. So great that they're looking at all the options, and hopefully there is one that is financially viable, that is doable within a good time scale as well, and it's not going to be too problematic. Because I think the location of St James's is fantastic for the city, for the fans, just for everything. I'd hate to see it the team playing elsewhere, to be honest. So fingers crossed it can come up with a good answer.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's great because it means Newcastle's progressed as a team and are going to get better. So it's great that they're looking at it. We will wait and see what happens. And I guess feasibility studies will come back with a result. Short term, they may increase the Gallagher then, but then it might make it easier for the club, I guess, to suggest moving grounds, moving the stadium. That's the other thing. The fact that we've got transparency and communication, which we've talked about at the top of the show, Ross, means that potentially Newcastle could turn around and say, "Well, look, we've had a look. This is what we can do. We can increase the capacity. However, this is the pitfalls. This is how much it's going to cost." Actually, if we looked at doing a stadium at this part of the city, which we think we could get, we could do it. What do you guys think? And maybe they could put it out to the supporters.
I think they will. I absolutely think that they will. I think that whatever that they'll do, I believe that they will ask and seek the views of season ticket holders of the general fan base, and I think that's only right. The club, yes, it's been bought by some very wealthy people, but it belongs to the fans, and ultimately it belongs to the fans, and the fans should have their say on big issues like this. In my opinion, they should have their say on whether Newcastle develop St James's or move to a purpose-built stadium elsewhere in the city or within the city confines, if you like. So, and I think the way the club is now, I do think they'll have that dialogue with supporters, and it'd be really interesting. We've done a couple of big surveys on it. We've had big numbers of people getting back in touch about the stadium, and the majority so far, I can only speak on the results that we've had. The majority want to stay at St James's. The majority want to see that ground developed rather than moving elsewhere. So, and I think that would be the preferred option for most people. So hopefully they can come up with a good solution, like I've just said. But I do think that they'll keep the fan base updated and ask their opinions on it. Okay, halfway through the show, time for the ads.
A big thanks to all our sponsors: Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website skipsandbins.com, easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's sauces, which are handmade in Cumbria. Their website is mrvickies.co.uk. If you want to contact the guys, email info@mrvickies.co.uk or telephone 01768 210 102. Big thanks to New Workwear. They are an agile and dedicated workwear provider launched in 2018. For more information, go to their website, newworkwear.com. Big thanks, as always, to Media Arts for the help with the video side of things. If you want to support the channel, hit the subscribe button, become a subscriber today. Hit the thumb up under the video, which likes the video, and click share to share to your other social media. Click join if you want to become a member of the channel for as little as $1.99, or take a one-off payment for the cult membership. You can get in via this QR code if you've got a smartphone, or look for membership pack on the website, NUFCmatters.com. What do you get for your one-off £25 payment? You get a scarf, a pen, and a cup, and a membership card, and entry into the monthly draw. Don't forget, if you want a car sticker, all you need to do is subscribe to the show and then email John at NUFC Matters, and he will post you a free car sticker out. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast providers, and we also support the food bank on this channel. nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk is the virtual matchday bucket, where you can make a virtual donation 365 days of the year. The new Alan Shearer raffle is underway. 150 tickets at £1 a ticket. You could win a limited edition signed Alan Shearer ball from the 260 dinner. Enter now at nufcmatters.com. We've got a few events coming up. August the 5th sees Gavin Peacock at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets are £10, and you can get them now from nufcmatters.com. Our Christmas event takes place on the 7th of December at the Tyneside Irish Centre, and that's an evening with Frank Clark. Tickets are £15 and available from nufcmatters.com. Finally, Waddle, Keegan, Beardsley and friends. The class of 84 is on at the Tyne Theatre and Opera House on Westgate Road in Newcastle on Thursday, January the 23rd. Tickets are now available from the Tyne Theatre and Opera House.co.uk or telephone 0844 2491 000. That's the box office telephone number 0844 2491 000. And for an event that we've got quite a few months to wait, that really is selling well. Keegan, Waddle and Beardsley, amazed at how many people have already bought tickets for that. It'll be a cracking night, and there are going to be some special guests as well, which we will announce in due course. But yeah, going to be a cracking night. That looking back at the that 2-year spell that Kevin Keegan was at the club, some wonderful games to talk about, and look back on a piece of history in our club's history. Yeah. So next talking point for myself and Ross today is Tonali. I mean, have you ever known a player who hasn't even signed a contract and got a medical, as he hadn't last week, has got 2 songs to his name already? It's been amazing to watch the social media rejoice for signing somebody who a lot of Italians are describing as one of the best players, if not the best player, currently in Serie A.
Yeah, look, it's. I think this one is a fantastic piece of business. Hopefully, if Newcastle can get the deal over the line. The time we've done this show, Steve, it's still not been announced or anything, but we are pretty much certain that it will be. He's somebody who's right at the kind of the peak of his career in Italy. Playing at a fantastic level, captain of the Italian under 21s, under 23s. He's somebody who has been earmarked for a couple of years for really big things, and the fact that Newcastle have stolen a march on other clubs and look to have got this deal done and in the bag. It's just a fantastic early bit of transfer news for Newcastle fans. I think the only caveat I've got with it, Steve, is that you don't see too many success stories of Italians in the Premier League in English football. I don't think there's the number of success stories that you've seen with whether with players from France or players from Belgium or Spain or Germany even. Italians coming into the Premier League haven't always succeeded in the way that you might have thought they would. So I think there will be a little bit of acclimatization from when he comes in. But he's obviously a fantastic player. Obviously got a great pedigree. Somebody who's so highly rated in Milan. For him to fit into Newcastle's midfield, even if it takes him a little bit of time to adjust, I'm sure with ability and everything else that he's got to be a fantastic acquisition. Hopefully, does a lot better than some of the Italians that we've had at St James's Park in the past. But look, what a way to start the summer transfer window with that bit of business.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic, great potential as well. Young player, fits the remit. It's great stuff. There is a player that we brought in the last transfer window, Anthony Gordon, who may well solve the problem of having another striker. The Chronicle, of course, doing a piece about Anthony Gordon scoring against Israel and Lee Carsley in the last two under-21 England internationals, playing him as a centre forward. So it's a bit of food for thought for Eddie Howe, I guess, Ross.
Yeah, and Eddie Howe, he'll know all about Anthony Gordon's versatility and his ability, and he's played through the middle for Everton as well before, so it's not something that he's completely coming in fresh at. It's not completely alien to him. Anthony Gordon's going to be an interesting one for the next season, for the new season, Steve. I think now he's had 6 months or so at the club, and he's had that bedding in period. He was probably a little bit frustrated, I think, with either his game time or his impact or anything else like that in the second half of the season after he joined. He's obviously been hampered a little bit by injuries. He was cup tied for the Carabao Cup thing as well, so it was a little bit stop-start for Anthony Gordon. But I think in flashes we saw what he's capable of, whether he's playing on the left or the right or through the middle. I think he's somebody that Eddie Howe really, really rates and really likes, and he's got some great attributes: his work rate, his pace, his technical ability as well. Whether he can play through the middle in week in, week out in the Premier League or the Champions League, then we'll just have to wait and see what Eddie Howe's plan is for him. But he's obviously a player that is very well thought of by the coaching staff at Newcastle, and he's got that versatility to him. He's got that hunger and desire to him as well. Now he's had his 6 months. He's going to have to, I think, hit the ground running at the start of the season. But I do see him having a real big impact and a big role to play at Newcastle from August onwards.
Big news as well since we last spoke is that the Newcastle United women's team is turning professional, Ross. I mean, they've had a wonderful season last season. They've filled St James's Park a few times now as well with a big crowd, record-breaking crowd. What's your views on them finally turning professional and doing it at a lower level than maybe others have in the past?
Yeah, I think so. I knew that, or I didn't know, but my understanding was that they were going to turn pro for a couple of months now. You'd heard the stories and the whispers around there, and speaking to people who were in and around the women's setup. So it didn't come as a major surprise. I think it's done. I think it's done early. It's obviously done a lot earlier in the development than what other clubs are, and I think part of that is probably to kind of give it that extra supercharge, if you like. Get the progress moving a little bit quicker. If you can put professionalism into the women's game when everybody else is playing, is still part-time or amateur, then you should stand yourself a better chance of getting promoted and moving up through the leagues. It shows Newcastle are serious about the women's game as well. It shows that it's not just a sideline or something that they're paying a little bit of lip service to and treating as not particularly seriously. I think it shows the value that they do put on the women's game, which is great. It also answers some of the questions that have been levelled at the ownership around women's rights and women's football and everything else like that. I think it's a good move for that. Women's football is, whether it's to everybody's tastes or not, is immaterial. It's one of the fastest growing elements of sport in this country. The interest in it at a grassroots level, at a junior level is immense. It's certainly a growth area of football, and I think Newcastle are looking at that and thinking, look, this is an opportunity for us to develop our links further into the community. It's an opportunity for us to show that we are serious about catering for our full fan base, not just the male element of it. So it can only be seen as a positive, and hopefully they can attract a good level of professional players, and we see them up in the WSL before too long.
Yeah, exciting times for the ladies team, and we'll follow their progress as we have each season. So other stuff, interesting articles I picked up from the Chronicle this week where Stephen Clements coming out in a recent interview saying that he's he's got nothing but admiration for the way that the new owners handled his situation. Of course, he was at Newcastle United, Ross, as a coach, and was deemed surplus to requirements, of course, when Eddie Howe came in, but his contract was honoured by Amanda Staveley and co. And another interesting piece I saw was Dan Langley's interview. Of course, he was released by Newcastle United, but again, he came out and was very positive about how it was handled, how Eddie Howe handled that situation, and it feels as if we're on this roller coaster at Newcastle. We've always said this, you get these wonderful highs, but you get massive lows. But we just seem to be on a constant high, and even people leaving the club have nothing but positive things to say, Ross.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's. It's not rocket science, though, Steve. It's not. It's just having some common decency with people, just being able to relate to people, to treat them the right way. If people are having difficult times in football, as a footballer, as a coach, as a manager, or whatever, it isn't all a bed of roses. I know it's a fantastic career for people to be in, and that then attracts the attention of people who are, well, what have you got to be upset about, or what you got to grumble about? You're a professional footballer, you're a professional football manager, whatever. But people still have their ups and downs within clubs. They will get released, like Dan Langley, 22 years old, and now looking for a new club, and he's just a young man. But at the opposite end, Stephen Clements, people get made redundant. People lose their jobs, and sometimes they might get a nice payoff. In Steve Bruce's case, or people like that, but in other cases, it's not masses of difference from you or I losing jobs. It's not nice, and I think when people go through these difficult times and big decisions have to be made, tough decisions have to be made about players' future and managers' futures and everything else like that, then a club has to be ruthless. It has to make them big decisions, but that doesn't mean that you can't do them with consideration, with care, and a duty of care towards the individuals concerned. It doesn't mean that you don't treat them right. You're just the human beings and people like you and I at the end of the day. And I think, again, you go back, you can only judge it on some of the things that you've seen previously, and sometimes I don't think that duty of care was there around players and managers. And there may be occasions in the future where players leave this Newcastle regime and they're upset and they're not particularly happy. But I think as an employer, you just want to treat people the way you want to be treated yourself, and if that means giving them a little bit of an arm around the shoulder, or just doing things the right way, treating people with respect, it goes a massive way, and it only helps your reputation as a club, as an employer, as a person as well. So great to hear these stories that when people are leaving the club, that they've been treated with that respect, and they've got a lot of good things to say about the manager Eddie Howe and the ownership as well.
There's an interesting point being brought up a couple of times now by people in the chat, and that is about Aston Villa and Brighton. Are we ignoring Aston Villa and Brighton after such a wonderful season? I mean, Brentford as well. Let's chuck them into the mix. People are saying that Chelsea are going to come back stronger, Liverpool are going to come back stronger, Spurs are going to come back stronger. But we need to remember that there was a new breed, if you like, of teams in and around the mix of European slots. So Aston Villa, could well be a threat next year, as could Brighton, as could Brentford. I mean, Brighton, of course, have to sell to survive. They've lost McAllister, possibly could lose Caicedo, maybe another. But they do seem to have a conveyor belt of players coming through, a bit like Southampton had in recent years. So, ultimately, there are other teams, aren't there, that could threaten Newcastle's European ambitions in the new season.
Oh, 100%, Steve. 100%. I think it's going to be. It's shaping up to be a really tough Premier League. I know we're still a couple of months almost, or 6-7 weeks away from the start of the season, but I think it's shaping up to be a really competitive league this season. Everybody's going to want to improve, and those teams that you mentioned, Chelsea, new manager, Mauricio Pochettino going in there. they'll be better. They have to be better. They can't be as poor as what they were. Liverpool, ended the season like an express train and almost caught up on that fourth place. They'll want to go strong again. Spurs with a new manager in place. Let's see how they do. Bit of an unproven quantity in the Premier League, certainly. Ange Postecoglou, but they'll obviously be gunning for to get back in the top four as well. So this competition is going to be vast. But I was massively impressed by the way Villa and Brighton finished the season. So the people who've mentioned them in the comments are absolutely spot on. What you've got with Villa in Brighton is you've got two solid clubs, but two very, very good managers in charge of them. And that's where a lot of their I suppose danger comes from is the capability, the capacity of the managers. Unai Emery is a really, really good manager. I know he didn't have the best of times at Arsenal, but he still had them finishing top four. He's still, he's won the Europa League on countless occasions, and the job that he did at Villa in that second half of the season. Where were they when he took over? They were nibbling around the relegation zone, weren't they? After Steven Gerrard got the bullet, and to get them right up into the top six at one point was just a fantastic second half of the season. And he is a very, very good manager, and you can see why Newcastle liked him so much, why he was right up there in terms of coming in and with Eddie Howe in terms of replacing Steve Bruce. And at the other end, you've got Roberto De Zerbi at Brighton, who you speak to managers. If you speak, you speak to coaches, your Pep Guardiola's, your Jurgen Klopp's, they rave about him and his tactics and the way that he's kind of the freshness of his approach at Brighton. So I don't know whether them two have got the stamina to keep going all the way through the season. You saw Brighton fall away a little bit towards the end, and Villa just ran out of steam a little bit as well. Whether they've got the stamina to go all the way through the season and challenge for top four, we'll have to wait and see. But that's what people were saying about Newcastle as well. People were saying Newcastle didn't have the stamina last season to last all the way through to the end of the season, and we're going to drop out of the top four eventually, and didn't. So I think with those two clubs in the kind of the top six, top seven, it's going to be a really difficult season for Newcastle again, with the Champions League football on top of it. It's going to add to the demands. But that's just what you want. You want good competition. You don't just want it to be a one or two horse race. So let's see how it goes. But I like those clubs. I like the managers of both of them.
Yeah, I mean, you need a bit of luck. You need luck with suspensions. You need luck with injuries. I'll ask you the same question once we know what our transfer business is. But do you think we'll finish top five? Top five will get you Champions League next year, of course. There's an additional place. So, do you feel like Newcastle could qualify for Champions League again? I mean, the vast majority of people on this platform seem to think we will. Because we're there, we still realise we've got to earn the right. But a lot of people think we've arrived and we're going to consolidate our position. And the new acquisitions, of course, strengthening the squad will, of course, tell us a lot by the time we come to the 1st of September.
Yeah, I think this summer's huge in terms of acquisitions, in terms of being able to bring in that quality, that depth of quality, the strength and depth. To maintain that push for top four, top five position. If you ask me right now, which obviously I've done, but if I had to give an opinion right now, I would say no. I think Newcastle will probably finish 6th, 7th, maybe 8th. I just think I think going into the Champions League and having all the midweek games, it will take a little bit of a toll. It will not just physically but mentally, in terms of what it means, for your preparation for games and everything else like that. I think it will be difficult to finish in that top four, top five with all the other clubs that are pushing for it, who've got a little bit stronger squads and more depth. But let's see what Newcastle do over the next 2 months, until the transfer window closes. If they can bring in more players of Tonali's capabilities of his class, if they can bring in, add 2 or 3 more of that kind of standard, then anything's possible, because it is a very, very good squad Newcastle have got. A little bit thin on numbers, but if you're adding in 4 or 5 world-class players, and Tonali is, he's got the capability to be a world-class player, then all of a sudden it changes things around quite considerably. But right now, I think it'll be difficult. Let's see what it looks like on September the 1st.
Where would you like to see Newcastle strengthen next, Ross?
For me, I'd like to see a new centre-half brought in. Probably a right-sided centre-half. I know that might sound a little bit odd in some ways, because Newcastle's defensive record was exceptional towards the all season last season, but towards the end of the season, I thought there was a few too many sloppy goals conceded. There was a bit of weakness in some of the defensive performances. I think you have to look at it and think, well, where can you improve this squad? Where can you improve this starting 11? I think Fabian Schär had a superb season, arguably one of the best seasons he's probably produced in his career. But I think you can upgrade that position. I think you can probably upgrade the left back position, and I think you can upgrade one of the forward positions as well. So for me, centre half would be my next port of call, and then probably left back after that.
Yeah, I think centre half will be improved. I think they could get away with it this year. I do feel like that. I think left back is probably where I would strengthen next. I think it's probably out of all the positions, it's the one where I think we need improving. And of course, Newcastle being linked with left backs, left, right, and centre. Excuse the pun, but I think a left back for me would be the key next. I think it'll be a forward as well brought in. Although Gordon, as we mentioned earlier on in the show, might change Eddie Howe's opinion. We've got a lot of options, a lot of people that we can move around up there. So maybe Anthony Gordon might be thought of in a different way or a different feel. We're also asking people on the show about their first game, Ross, because we're going to bring back the feature My First Game on the Geordie's Here, Geordie's There programme. What was your first Newcastle game? Can you remember it?
So yeah, my first game, if you can class it as a first game, which I think you probably can, but my first game was Kevin Keegan's testimonial, 84. Went with my dad, sat in the East Stand as we talked about earlier, and I was 7 years old then, I think 5, 6, 7 years old. That was my first game in the flesh. Fantastic experience. I'd been into football probably at this stage for a couple of years, probably since probably about 82. I kind of got into football around the World Cup, the Italian World. When Italy won the World Cup in 82 was kind of my first exposure to it, and then after that, the next couple of years listening to bits of radio commentary and this, that, and the other, trying to follow Newcastle, and then that first game, the testimonial, and obviously very naive, young, not been to a game before that. Found the whole experience thrilling and bewildering and exciting, and all in equal measure. I think I've probably told the story before, but I thought for a few years after that game, I thought that every game ended with a helicopter coming onto the pitch in the centre circle and whisking players off, and I remember I couldn't keep track of the score. I know it was 2s each now, but I couldn't keep track of the score. I think there must have been a disallowed goal or something. I couldn't figure out what was going on at one point, and I was so excited and bewildered and captivated by the whole thing. It was a great game. Your first game's your first game. In another day, it could be for other people, it might be a 0-0 draw against Millwall or whatever. It could be something dull and very little happening. But you will always remember it because of the experience of walking into the ground for the first time, for everything else that comes with it. And to have that as my first game, Kevin Keegan's testimonial, helicopters on the pitch, laps of honour, all that sort of stuff was a fantastic experience.
Yep, same game as mine as well. So we'll share something very similar there. Great stuff, great show as always, Ross. Do you want to give a push to where people can find your work and what you guys do?
Yeah, we've I do bits and pieces for the Chronicle, for the Mirror, and a few others in the role that I've got. We've got a few things coming up on the Chronicle. We finished our big survey. Thanks very much for everybody who took part in that. We had probably about 9,000 responses on that, and we'll be getting the results out and letting people know how that went. And like I say, I appreciate everybody jumping on that. We're looking at doing also a next generation series over the next few weeks, launching that. It's going to look at some of the academy players and some of the hot prospects in the kind of 15, 16, 17-year-old age bracket at Newcastle who might make a push into the first team. Whether that's we've seen with this season with Lewis Miley and Elliot Anderson, and there's one or two others who are bubbling away. So we'll be doing a bit of a series on those and asking for readers to get involved as well. So keep an eye out for that one. That'll hopefully be coming down the track pretty soon.
Okay, great stuff, Ross. Look forward to seeing you again next week, mate. Have a good week. Take care.
You too, Steve. Cheers. Take care.